What is up, guys? It is time for an MLB Deeper Dive where we will go game by game here on this afternoon 6-game slate and cover everything you need to know amongst all the hitting, all the pitching. We'll do it all here for you. But I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by the namesake of this YouTube channel, the man behind it all and the top DFS player in the world. He's Alex Awesemo Baker. How you doing, Alex?
Yo, dudes. Doing pretty good. Man, like in MLB streets, like everyone's been talking about this spin rate stuff, so I'm interested to hear you guys take. But it looks like we got a nice little 6-game slate where it's like some games look really good for pitching and others look really good for bats. So this one might be pretty easy for us.
Hopefully we can figure it out here with the help of another man, the brain trust behind the bomb detector. I don't even know how to give that plug for you properly, Gundacker, but a man who's doing a lot of great stuff out here. You could follow on Twitter at Gundacker. He's Gundacker. How you doing, buddy?
We're doing all right. It's just should be an easy I don't say easy, but a much more easy to break down and digest slate. So I'm excited for. I like these little 6 to 8 gamers, kind of my wheelhouse in every sport.
Yeah, definitely should be a good amount of options to hit, and honestly, hopefully some clear pass upside. So hit that like button right now if you can, guys. Obviously, every time we do a show, the picks are only going to be as accurate as the amount of likes we have. So help us out, hit that like button, and of course, subscribe to the channel to check out all the content we have for both the MLB. I was up bright and early doing a show with Greg Ehrenberg this morning for the early slate. We have the strategy show and all that for MLB, NBA still going strong, PGA, MMA. It's all here on the channel. So subscribe now and hit that notification bell to know whenever we go live. And also make sure to check out our sponsor for the day, Jock Market, where if you haven't heard, they are turning the fantasy sports world into a stock exchange where you can forget about waiting until the end of the game to make money. Jock Market allows you to buy and sell shares of players in real time for real money with guaranteed payouts for all shares at the end of the night. They have daily markets for the NBA, MLB, NHL, and PGA where you can make real money every hour, every minute, every second of any match or game. The games like yesterday talked about Garrett Cole and maybe watching the early parts of that one, seeing how you felt about the spin rate on Jock Market. You can actually take that advice and take it in real time. And that's really the only place in the industry you can do that. So download the app to get started and use our exclusive Awesemo promo code of Awesemo for a $50 bonus on your first deposit. Is an exclusive offer only for the Awesemo community, so take advantage of it today. Use that promo code Awesemo for a $50 deposit bonus over at Jock Market, JOCK MKT. Check them out today. They are one of these sites doing something different out there and a good way to get some more skin in the game for all you guys out there. Well, let's talk about this first game on the slate. We are going to go game by game here. San Francisco, 3.1 implied runs going against Max Scherzer, and Max Scherzer, maybe somebody who could be on the spin rate watch list, but a 36% K rate on the year, a 0.82 whip for himself, 3.1 xFIP is basically looking like the same guy, arguably a better version of himself than we've seen the last few years, as he's already been an ace and a world beater and a World Series guy. We have seen Max Scherzer be that dude recently, and it does seem like, Alex, the spot for Max Scherzer going to be very highly owned, 54% expected ownership on DraftKings, but projection on him that is going to be as good as anybody we will find on today's slate.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick holes in Max Scherzer. He's kept up the same numbers that's made him great throughout his career. So really, we're looking at the matchup here, and San Francisco, they've been playing pretty well this year, but like that's another one. It's not exactly the spin rate, but I'm like, what is going on with this team? They're just way better than I ever remembered. So it's not the easiest matchup in the world, but it's not enough to make me really worry about Scherzer being effective here.
Gundacker, how are you feeling about Scherzer, where we do have a day going to be rainy and humid over in Washington? Looks like 86% humidity, about 80-degree weather for when first pitch goes off. And Scherzer does let the ball take flight. If you can make contact with it, you got a chance to drive it. So I guess any cause for concern for you at all, given what Alex just mentioned, a giant team that's been hitting for power more than perhaps would be expected. And Scherzer, a great strikeout guy, but certainly one who can be a bit home run prone at times.
Yeah, I think when you put Scherzer on the table here with every pitcher on the slate, he's easily the uppest of echelons in terms of options. But the weather is definitely a concern, especially when it comes to the Washington Nationals. They're kind of unpredictable when it comes to making some of these decisions. And Scherzer's right now, we got him at 50% ish, so it's gonna be a mainstay. A lot of players pitching spots. And if this game is yoinked from us, It'll be a lot of scurrying, but if it's on the table, it also is just kind of inherently risky. So I would definitely be keeping my ear to the ground on the weather itself. But if Scherzer's available, he's easily a top option, and even a bad game for his sake here could still be over 20 fantasy points, which might be enough to get you to the dance, considering some of the alternatives on the slate.
So I guess the follow-up question I have for you, Gundacker, would be, and I'm not sure if you're playing on FanDuel today, but I'll ask you the question because I'm sure you're going to have a good answer for it. But on FanDuel, where it is a single pitcher site and you have about a 20% chance of Max Scherzer to be a top pitcher today, according to our top pitchers tool, 41% expected ownership on there. Does he give you any different feelings on FanDuel where he is a guy that you're basically having to cast your entire lot with him? And there is a chance here at his price tag that maybe you just can't pay it off at $11K.
Yeah, I mean it's all weather contingent. On FanDuel, there's still plenty of value to fit him in easily. You really want that 6th inning, so even if they start that game and you'd be worried about a 3rd, 4th inning shower, it becomes a risk. But I don't want to play weatherman and kind of spook people, so I definitely encourage you guys to keep your ear to the ground yourself and do your due diligence. But yeah, if weather becomes an issue and his ownership is going to hold a decent level, I might back up. But without the weather, he's the best pitcher on the slate.
Alex, how are you feeling about the weather risk that's going on that Gundacker's talking about here, where this is going to be a game that's going to be marked red, and some of the DFS weather models that people out there are all tracking, and it's a spot where, I think the game, we don't have it currently having a postponement risk, I think, on the projections, but those update throughout the day. So how are you feeling about that situation? And I guess also, relative to the high ownership that's expected for Scherzer?
Yeah, I think we should definitely keep an eye on it. It doesn't look like horrible at this point. I'm just bringing up the dark sky forecast here. So can you guys see this? No, I'm just kidding. It looks like there's a chance of light rain like pretty much all night. So because this is the first game of the slate, just take a look at the radar an hour before the game and we should have a good idea. On just the Google weather, it shows a pretty low chance of rain up until 10 p.m. So I don't feel like this one is super risky. But obviously that can change pretty quick, and DC has a reputation that we should all be aware of. But usually it's when like one of their bad pitchers is going up that they postpone the game, like a Eric Fede, maybe, not a Max Scherzer. So I don't know if they want to push it back. Although is he pitching on short rest? I seem to remember one of my buddies was telling me about that.
For Scherzer? Or
he last pit. Okay, he pitched June 4th, so never mind. It's 6 days ago. So I don't know what he was talking about.
Yeah, maybe short emotional rest. He hasn't had much downtime for himself, with all the spin rate talk. It's really been getting to him. The Giants bats on the side are going to project for basically no ownership and do have the top stack potential. And then we're going to talk to this game is on the assumption that it does play. And obviously if it doesn't play, we'll talk about those contingencies throughout the rest of the games. But the Giants bats, Alex, not a lot of ownership going there. Good chance of being a value stack, but they are going against Scherzer, who is clearly one of the best guys in the league in terms of just avoiding walks and hits on an overall inning basis, a .82 whip for him on the year. How are you feeling about the Giants bats? Did you get any at all in a slate of this size?
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy given the weather being favorable to bats. And I think the spin rate's kind of the X factor where if they're actually cracking down, I'm not really convinced they are, but if they can get past Scherzer, it'd probably be a pretty decent matchup. So I think can make some San Francisco lineups that are decent, but it's not going to be a team I'm really going after.
Gundacker, do you see any value here in San Francisco? Not a lot of ownership for these guys. And you do have some guys who've really driven the ball well this year. Belt, Posey, Crawford, all these guys have been hitting, I think for Crawford in particular, hitting well above his depth in a way that almost doesn't make sense. But guys who've had some power on the year. So you want to go to any Giants bats or are they not for you?
Yeah, I mean, if the ownership is going to be low enough on a 6-gamer and it's not going to cost me much equity, I'll probably put some in my back pocket against the highest owned pitcher. Why not? Take 5-6% of that.
Yeah, it's not definitely not one to load up on, but with no ownership going their way, I'm with that take. I think getting a little bit, maybe taking some one-offs, especially, I think would not be the worst move. The other side, we're gonna have Anthony DeSclafani going for the Giants. He's very cheap now. The projection will probably make him pop up a little bit on an optimizer, but not a lot of ownership expected his way on DraftKings under 6%. And his strikeout rate's been down to a 21% clip or 21.4% clip from 22.2% since 2019. Giving up less power, walks and hits have been down as well to a 1.1 whip. For the most part, as a fantasy pitcher, kind of seems like he's settling in as a guy who's not having as much strikeout upside and maybe a little more real life viability. But Gundacker, do you have any feel here for DeSclafani? Are you willing to go there for the cheap price tag?
Nah, I probably want to stay away from him here and probably target some of these Nats bat. The top 5 of the Nats look pretty appealing to me as a stack. I love the speed and power combo of Trey Turner, and then Juan Soto's an excellent fill-in. And then guys like Harrison Bell, Kyle Schwarber, they kind of fit the bill. And we know Schwarber also has some power to take advantage of DeSclafani's historical splits in terms of surrendering power to lefties. So I'm more on the Nats bats here.
It does seem like Schwarber, too, on OddsShopper, one of the best props or best odds today for hitting a home run, plus 280 for him to do that against DeSclafani. And DeSclafani has certainly been a guy who given up a lot of power to lefties, a 213 ISO since 2019, a 5.5 xFIP. So I'm with that take. I think Juan Soto, an interesting one-off play, too, or as part of the mini stack. But Alex, would you go to a full national stack here, or are you feeling more that some of the individual hitters, especially the lefties, might have more upside?
One thing I will note, we just got the Giants lineup, so I'm trying to look through that. I guess that's pretty much what we expected. So it does look like some of the bad players at the bottom of the lineup got even worse. I have the team as being a little bit worse than average power, so good matchup for Scherzer. On the Nats side, I do think DeSclafani is in play. He's not like a bad pitcher. Doesn't get like a ton of strikeouts, but the price is right at 6,300. The Nats lineup doesn't strike out a ton, but it doesn't have like a lot of talent outside like the top 3 or 4 guys. So I think you could take some shots on him, but the Nats as a stack look solid as well with the favorable hitting conditions and. I guess the pricing looks like fair enough, so you can go to them for sure.
You're currently looking a little bit over on the top stacks tool, but a lot of that going to Juan Soto and Kyle Schwarber in particular. So if you get yourself Trey Turner, Josh Harrison in the mix, those are guys who can decrease the ownership there. And honestly, the bottom of the order with guys like Starlin Castro, Yan Gomes, Victor Robles, not guys who have the best rates or overall against righties. So I wouldn't mind just focusing more on the top 5, but definitely some ways you could decrease the ownership if you did want to go to the Nats. Next game up, it gets to Houston with 4.3 implied runs against Eduardo Rodriguez. Eduardo Rodriguez this year giving up a 291 batting average, which is not a great number for him, and a shockingly low 3.2 xFIP. So I guess he's the feel here is he's getting pretty unlucky with a 370 batting average on balls in play on the year. A 1.4 whip also seems a little bit high for a guy who's got a decent walk rate, a 5.6% walk rate. And Rodriguez on the slate, I feel like it's a nice price tag, but he's facing an Astros team only strikes out 16.6% of the time against left-hand pitching. So Alex, would you take any stabs at all at Rodriguez, given that he's single-digit owned? Or are you feeling the Astros bats a little more, given that they seem currently a little bit under-owned on the top stacks tool?
Yeah, Houston's a really tough matchup for pitchers because they strike out an unusually low amount, only about 75% of the league average. And today, it looks like it's going to be about the same. So that makes a pretty good pitcher and Eduardo Rodriguez look a lot worse. So I think he's not out of play entirely because he's a pretty solid talent, 26% strikeout rate this year. And he's really, really cheap on FanDuel, 6,500, but kind of far down the list. So Houston as a stack. The weather in Boston is not the most favorable today, in the low 60s today. But it is a great batter's park. So I feel like Houston's already a good team, and being in Fenway is going to make them look even better.
Gundacker, how about you with the Houston Astros stack? Or I guess Eduardo Rodriguez, if you feel any interest there. But it does seem like Houston going against Rodriguez, a guy is mostly keeping the ball down, not the highest barreled ball rate at 7.7%, a launch angle, 10.6-degree launch angle. So it does seem like this could be a spot where he's not going to get a ton of strikeouts, maybe does enough to keep the Astros down. How are you feeling about it?
Houston is the top team in WRC plus against left-handed pitchers. You put that in a more hitter-friendly environment like Fenway, it does make me very scared to roster Rodriguez. It's kind of one of those slates where I might take a 14 to 18 from an SP2 if I put 7K on Rodriguez, but I'm definitely more inclined to believe that the Astros bats are in the better spot here. So you mentioned it, their ownership on the top stacks tool pretty low, all things considered, on how small this slate is. So I'm way more enamored by the Astros bats here. I wouldn't fault anyone for playing Erod on the slate as shallow as the pitching pool as we have today, especially if something does come of weather in Washington. But I think the matchup and the numbers are going to push me more towards the bats on the Houston side.
And some of the bats here, they're going to be higher owned, include Alex Bregman, Jordan Alvarez, and Jose Altuve on DraftKings. I guess a little bit behind those other two guys, will still be decently owned, but not a lot of ownership going to Carlos Correa. It does seem like it's a reasonable price tag. Kind of surprised at that number. Jordan Alvarez, also the DraftKings price tag of 3,700. Would not be shocking to see that number even come up a little bit at 18% expected ownership. But that was some way to stack up Houston if you want to go there against Rodriguez and not get a ton of ownership. On the other side, we have Zach Greinke going at pitcher. Greinke on the year getting even worse in the way of strikeouts historically since 2019, been a 22.3% K rate guy, down to 18.4% this year. 1.1 whip, though, basically right in line with where he's been historically. Doesn't walk a lot of guys. And I feel like Gundacker may be on the slate. Greinke's playable just because of what we've talked about, where it's not a great pitching slate. And Greinke does throw 93 pitches per appearance this year, 6 innings or so per appearance as well. So you could get deep enough into the game to be useful here at single-digit ownership.
Yeah, kind of the best case scenario for a Greinke good game for fantasy is eating innings at this point, which makes it a little bit more volatile because if he does let a couple of earnings across the plate, he really can't erase that with the strikeout. But as you see in his last 3 of his last 4 games, he's gone 8 innings or greater, including that last CG against Toronto. But there's no strikeouts to show for it. So it's a really, really tough spot to be in. And his ground ball to fly ball rate is, it's almost even. Like there's not like, it's not like he's elite at just inducing ground balls and soft contact. Like I don't want to say it's lucky, but it's very volatile to kind of bank on these type of results for fantasy for just a little bit over 20 fantasy points. So I don't like that. I do think the Red Sox are a good offense. But like we said, like if you would take a shot at 20 DKP here, I don't think he's off the table. And when it's all said and done, he might hit the back end of my player pool. I think Max Scherzer, Trevor Rogers is going to be kind of the foundation for everyone. But just to get a little different in the back end, yeah. But it just seems like the best case scenario for him from a fantasy standpoint is 8 innings and like 4 strikeouts if you're lucky.
Alex, how are you feeling about Greinke here? Because I think Gundacker raises some good points that you are going to basically just have to have him cobble together a day where he pitches deep into the game, gets fast at bats, and that's what he's been doing all year. 3.7 pitches per at bat that he's facing these guys, so he is getting guys out fairly fast. And he's never been a good fantasy pitcher, Alex. But I guess the question for you, who has studied this stuff over a longer period of time, are you willing to ride with a guy like Greinke on the slate where there's maybe less dependable strikeout guys anyway, and the fact that the pitch count's there, is that enough for you to get on Greinke with single-digit ownership?
I think he's in the fringe of being playable. Like I probably wouldn't want to play him because of the low strikeout rate, like you're saying, and the park and Boston just being a stronger team than your average team. So like that's a lot of negative factors on top of a guy that's not that good to begin with. But on a 6-game slate, we gotta pick some spots to get unique. I don't think it's crazy to pick this one. I just don't think I want to do it.
the Boston hitters do have 4.7 implied runs going their way. So Alex, I'll throw it to him or to you then with this side of the equation where Greinke should be, maybe a decent enough play, certainly been decent in limiting production, if not getting himself great fantasy results. But Boston, we know, can get going in any spot. They do have a 188 ISO on the year against right-hand pitching. So proven consistent to have that production in a bunch of situations. So how are you feeling about them relative to their ownership, where currently on the top stack stool does seem like they are one of the most under-owned teams relative to their chance of being a top stack?
Yeah, I think Boston is intriguing today. They're super expensive, which is driving down the ownership. So probably not easy to pair with Scherzer. So then it's kind of like, are there a couple of cheap guys that we can get down with? I think you can make it work today and get a low-owned stack that has a lot of potential. So I think Boston could be a good one. It's just you might not like the rest of your lineup that much.
Gundacker, how are you feeling about the Boston hitters? Whereas Alex mentioned it's a very expensive stack. You're going to be paying mid 5,000 price tags for guys like Bogarts and Devers on DraftKings and still really not getting any value savings for the most part across the board. So how are you approaching these Boston bats, and are you willing to be there heavy?
Yeah, but I don't think we need to be there heavy, right? We can almost triple the field and still be, under 15% equity in 150 lineup. So I definitely like the Boston stack. Greinke definitely has a lot of redeeming qualities to target in terms of opposing offense. And Boston actually came out very righty heavy with just Verdugo and Devers, who are two of their best hitters anyway. So some of these middle to below average righties can take advantage of Greinke's poorer splits to righties, such as this, under 18% K rate, his elevated average allowed, and some power. So I think the Red Sox stack is really, really in a good spot. And I like both offenses here. So this might break out into a football game.
And to Gundacker's point, now that I'm looking at it, there is every single Boston hitter projected for under 5% ownership. So you really don't have to go that crazy here. The highest projected owned guy will be JD Martinez, and still he's under 5%. So lots of ways to get to these guys and not take out a lot of your overall exposures. It's easy to get above the field. So worth attacking that spot too. Next game up, and we appreciate the support on the likes. If you guys are watching live, the chat's doing a great job. Got about a 33% like rate. So thank you guys for doing that. If you're watching after the fact, hit that like button too. We appreciate it a bunch here. Obviously helps us stay ahead of the fray with the YouTube algorithm that is constantly changing to make it tough for content creators. But we appreciate that support a bunch from you guys. So please hit that like button on our shows and any of them you find out there. Colorado, 3.1 implied runs against Trevor Rogers. And Trevor Rogers, Gundacker talked about him briefly earlier, but a guy who does project to be one of the top plays and one of the core plays, especially on DraftKings today, where he and Max Scherzer will be a popular duo, it seems. 9K price tag, 50% expected ownership. And Rogers on the year has a 30% K rate, a little bit less than that, a 3.4 xFIP. He's also going against a Colorado team that's certainly not that good, though. I feel like the strikeout rate you'd think would be a bit higher, 23.2% on the year against lefty pitching, but they are a very mediocre team otherwise, a 101 WRC plus. So they're right there with average, but again, probably better you'd think of Colorado. But in the spot, Gundacker, you've already planted a flag for Rogers, so go ahead and give me your thoughts on him, because he does seem, outside of Scherzer, the best pitcher on the slate by, I'd say, a decent margin.
Yeah, and he's arguably underpriced at 9K. 9K with a 30% K rate to both sides of the plate, facing a Rockies team that, maybe their strikeout rates don't project as high as we think they would, but they're on the road here. You take them from Corey, you should put them into Miami, and they have an implied run total. I'm looking at 3.2. I don't know if you guys see a different number, but I mean, that's like teams against Garrett Cole levels of low total. So this is a really, really, I don't want to say easy play, but it seems like an easy play when I consider all those factors. 9K for Rogers, some home cooking, and a Rockies team that is below average in WRC plus against lefties. Yeah, I have to be a heavy investor in that. And at that ownership, he's 50%. So you wonder, what's the worst case scenario? But I take 20 happily, and I think he has a chance of being a top 2, top 3 scoring pitcher on the slate. So I might even get more of him than Scherzer when it's all said and done.
Yeah, definitely the price tag offers a little savings from Scherzer if you were to treat Rogers like an SP1. And to spot Alex, I guess that would be a question for you. Are you seeing yourself having more lineups with Rogers and Scherzer? Or are you thinking it's more logical to go to Rogers as a pivot to Scherzer? Because the Rogers-Scherzer duo here will probably be really highly owned and push people to a pretty obvious construction where they're going to probably go into the same value teams, some of the ones we're going to hit on throughout the course of the show.
Definitely. Yeah. I feel like it could be a trap to pair them for the reasons you're saying, because you're really taking some of the good stacks off the table with that pairing. And you're going to have a very similar lineup construction to other people with that combo. So I do feel like Rogers is my preferred option between the two. Actually, now that I'm saying this, I might. I think they're both very good options, probably about equal. Now, Miami has a lot of things going for them, or Rogers does, because Miami is indoors. Although I guess maybe it's only 80 degrees there, so I'm not sure if they have the roof open.
I think I'm seeing
this close.
So
yeah,
at least last that I pulled.
Okay, so when the roof is closed, it is one of the best parks for pitchers, and Colorado is just like one of the worst lineups in the league. And Rogers has been excellent this year, 30% K rate so far. The only thing is some of the better Rockies players are right-handed. I don't think it really moves the needle at all, though. So I do feel like Rogers is probably it's kind of 1A and 1B for Rogers and Scherzer for me today.
Definitely some positive numbers for Rogers. Also a low barrel ball rate for him on the year, just 4.2%, 1.1% on run rate. And certainly the park factors today, assuming that roof is closed, is going to be one that should help him continue to keep that going here. Not a guy giving up a ton of hard contact, and a guy also missing bats very well in the year. I guess, Alex, any Colorado bats interest for you? It is a short enough slate, and there'll be a lot of ownership going to Rogers. So I feel like we made the case a little bit for Scherzer, just putting some bats against them in some amount of lineups. But would you take any of a bad Colorado team, or I guess honestly a Colorado team that the team results on the year against left-hand pitching seems way better than their lineup they're going to have out there today?
Well, yeah, I mean, they play half their games at Coors too. So I do feel like San Francisco is a much more talented team right now. So between the two, I'd rather get the leverage on Scherzer. But it looks like no one's on Colorado. Like, our ownership for each player in this lineup is 1. So we do have them as a 2.8% chance of being the top stack, and only 1% people are on them. It's because they're expensive and not well projected either. So it's another one where I feel like you could make a profitable lineup because nobody is on these guys and they're going to have a good day like once in a while. But I do feel like there's better ways to tackle this slate.
Gundacker, how about you? Would you take on any Rockies for yourself? Again, as Alex points out, these price tags are not cheap. And in fact, you could argue might be pretty close to their price tags normally in Coors. But it is a spot here where they will be entirely unowned. And maybe you could pay up to be contrarian, pay up and also ignore projections to be contrarian in this one spot.
Nah, I'll probably surrender the Rockies. Like the pricing, normally I argue they're too cheap in Coors, but the pricing feels a little uncomfortable here. And then behind Rogers is actually a pretty solid bullpen for the Marlins. So, I don't think I'll invest in the Rockies.
All right, let's try to get through this last side of the equation here, and then we'll do some money time, give it the top 5 owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel. But got Chichi Gonzalez going against Miami. Miami's got 4.5 implied runs. And Chichi, one of those guys who pitches in Coors a lot and just keeps the ball down and gives up hits, but doesn't give up a lot of dangerous power. 2.9% on run rate for him on the year, 3.5% historically. And then again, that's with pitching at Coors. So fairly impressive results by Chichi relative to the fact that he's not a guy who's going to give you great fantasy results. A 12.3% K rate, 1.4 whip. So Chichi probably not playable even on a short slate, Gundacker. But how about going against him for Miami? 4.5 implied runs, not a bad mark, though they have not hit right-hand pitching very well in the year. Are you willing to go to either Chichi or the Marlins bats?
Yeah, actually, I can kind of make a loose case for the Marlins bats, but the team WRC plus against righties not good. Their overall numbers aren't great, but if we paint these numbers for the Rockies pitching, Chichi Gonzalez pretty bad. Yesterday, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I got 4 guys out the pen that threw over 14 pitches, 3 guys over 20 for the Rockies. And the Rockies bullpen, with a little bit of grain of salt, because of course, is one of the worst bullpens in baseball. So it might be 9 quality innings of at-bats for these Marlins hitters. And it's going to be a lot of contact pitching even when you get into the bullpen. So you put the ball in play, good things can happen. And they got some fun guys: Jazz Chisholm, Marte, Jesus Aguilar, Corey Dickerson, all guys I can get behind. And even Adam Duvall has some fun power. And Ben Bowden and Lucas Gilbreth did not throw yesterday, so we might get lefties in the middle of this game for the Rockies bullpen. And we love Adam Duvall against some spot lefties, so I could get behind some Marlins here. I don't want to I don't want to get people too excited, but there's a lot going their way here.
It looks like they have about a 6% chance of being a top stack and close to 5% ownership. So, Alex, for you, these Marlins bats, are you willing to go there against Chi? And the Gundacker made the case pretty well there. And you have some guys who have power, though. Early Duvall, the only guy over a 200 ISO historically against right-hand pitching. So, you willing to get there against Chi and a not great Colorado bullpen either behind them?
Yeah, I don't think it's crazy, but the conditions in Miami, like being indoors, are some of the less appealing ones of the slate. And Chichi Gonzalez, although he's not a good pitcher, I'm looking at this 4.6 xFIP from this year. That's not horrible, and the sample size is decent. So it does seem like there's not like a ton of incentive to go to Miami today. I might have a few stacks, but I think we can find some better ones.
And then I just enjoyed this chat that we got from, let's see, this was Sean Garfield saying, nice to see my man Gun on the show with Awesemo and crew, which I agree with the sentiment here that it's nice to see Gundacker on the show. I feel like it would have taken one more letter to put Spags in there. Like, I don't want to crew. But Gundacker, some praise for you from Sean Garfield, who I presume also hates Mondays.
Don't we all?
Don't we all? All right, speaking of a thing that I'm sure Sean will love, let me flip my hat and let's do some money time here. It's time for the crew to shine and read the top 5 projected owned plays on DraftKings and FanDuel, courtesy of our Awesemo ownership projections that you can always get for yourself at awesemo.com/join. And in fact, if you go there right now and use the promo code MLB Deeper Dive, you can get yourself 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. And if you're also only looking to play the MLB, you can get an MLB weekly package for just $15.95. Wow, even cheaper than I thought, $15.95. So go check those out at awesemo.com/join. Top 5 projected owned plays on DraftKings as of right now: Max Scherzer, number 1 at 54%. Number 2, Trevor Rogers at 51%. Number 3, DJ LeMahieu. We've not gotten to that stack yet, but 38% ownership expected his way. Giancarlo Stanton, 35% going his way. And then Frankie Montas, another man we haven't hit on yet, at 32%. And Gundacker, I'll ask you real fast, that top 5, Scherzer, Rogers, LeMahieu, Stanton, Montas, any of those guys jump out to you as being egregiously overowned?
Probably LeMahieu.
I feel like always LeMahieu. Alex, same thing for you. Would you agree LeMahieu here at 38% feels just a bit lofty?
Yeah, definitely. I'm seeing really high ownership all over this New York and Minnesota game, so that definitely makes a fade in play.
And on the FanDuel, the top 5 owned plays on there will be Max Scherzer at 41.5%. DJ LeMahieu, again, 37% on there, though at least he's 3K on FanDuel, so maybe a little more logic there. Giancarlo Stanton, number 3 on FanDuel at 36%. Number 4, Aaron Judge at 34%. And number 5, Nelson Cruz at 30%. I'll spare us the question because I think we're going to say it's LeMahieu again for FanDuel, but there's your top 5 plays. And use that promo code MLB Deeper Dive to get 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus if you go to awesemo.com/join now. But let's talk about this Yankee stack because they're next up anyway. They have 5.8 implied runs going against Jay Happ. I'll pronounce his name the right way after Gundacker got me the other time for calling him J.A. Won't throw him the disrespect. Jay Happ, he has been terrible on the year, has been old Jay. 5.4 xFIP, a 17% strikeout rate, maybe giving up less in the way of home runs than you would think, but it's a 90-degree day in Minnesota, 40% humidity, so just hot, but still the humidity is going to be enough to let the ball fly. And Happ is so bad. Gundacker, I'll throw it to you first since you have taught me the ways of pronouncing Happ's name right. In this spot, A, I'm going to assume you're not playing any Happ, but B, the Yankees, how are you feeling about the ownership? Because you can make the case for any of these individual guys to tee off on Happ today, but the stack being this owned is a large number, even for a mid-sized field.
Yeah, and for me to end up being the guy pushing back on the Yankees is a little ironic, but the Yankees have been one of the worst offenses in baseball all year. And yesterday they teed off on Randy Dobnak, and for some reason, I think it's Baldelli, they just left him in there. Like, they left him in there to just get beat up on and give up 11 hits, 8 runs, the starter. After Dobnak was removed in 4.2 innings, they went, 3.2 innings of 1-run ball and, a hit per inning. So the Yankees looked more like the Yankees after Dobnak was taken out, and kind of more the same in the game prior. The game prior where the Yankees put up some runs, it was a lot of for the new kid Jax. I think it was his first big league appearance. So I'm not saying I'm not going to be an investor in the Yankees today, but I'm also saying 3 days ago, this was the worst offense in baseball, and now they're the highest owned stack on the slate. So there is some room for disappointment, as they've been doing all year. They're still the worst base running team in baseball. So I definitely, like, if it wasn't the Yankees, I would be easily against a stack in this spot at this ownership on a small slate. But because it is the Yankees, I will be putting some money behind them. But yeah, it kind of doesn't add up. It's like so reactionary to just what happened yesterday, basically. So I'm gonna have them, but I just wanted to at least play devil's advocate there and kind of remind everybody, like, a couple of days ago, this is the most disappointing team in baseball.
And even if you look at the numbers on the year against left-hand pitching, only a 152 ISO, 306 on base percentage, but like fine numbers, but not the world-beating numbers you'd expect from a Yankee team is going to be the zone today. But Alex, 5.8 implied runs against J Happ, who's been bad and giving up a high barrel ball rate, the highest mark on the slate, 11.5%. Launch angle 2 going to translate to home runs, 17.5 degrees. So how do you handle this team? Because I know in the past you've advocated for these very, very chalky stacks, either maybe taking them out of the player pool or cutting them down substantially. But in this spot, you could really imagine any Yankee player going off. So just how do you approach him?
Yeah, I mean, the chance that the Yankees are the top scoring stack of the day is very significant at almost 25%. So it's hard to write them off entirely, but it's like, man, every single batter in this lineup has high ownership. It's not even like you can get a little different. I'm not really worried about the start of the season woes. Like, it looks like their power just hasn't been very good compared to what we have projected for their power going forward. For whatever reason, maybe they're just cold. But I'm a little bit wary about this 11 over under, to be honest, because I know it's 90 degrees in Minnesota, but still, that's a ridiculous over under. J Happ's not good, but he's like a little bit below average. It's not like a dream matchup or anything. So I do feel like this over under for the game is a little high, but I mean, this is one of the highest over unders we've seen this year. So regardless, this game environment is going to be great.
And I guess, Alex, the other question would be in terms of just approaching the ownership where you have these guys, DJ LeMahieu, we talked about him on DraftKings, going to be 38% expected ownership, Stanton over 35%. I guess, is there an overall approach to how, if you were somebody out there trying to stack this team up and figure out how to do it, like, is there a cap you're giving these guys? Are you maybe goosing Rougned Odor a little bit more just to get the one low owned guy? Is there anything you would do to make a little more sense for the people out there?
So the way you do it is you just take a stand on something that's low owned. So like a Colorado stack, a San Francisco stack, or like one thing you could do is just spend up on the most expensive guys and don't play like the expensive pitchers. Just I think that most lineups are going to have Rodgers or Scherzer today. So if you go to some of the less likely guys, maybe your lineup will be a little bit more unique.
Gundacker, is there anything you're seeing for how to approach the Yankees? Like, if you were, I know you mentioned, some reservations with them, given that they are just coming off some good days and the field maybe chasing that a little bit more in addition to the matchup with Happ. But is there anybody who stands out with you amongst the bats or anything in terms of approach if somebody's trying to play the Yankees, but not sure to prioritize?
I mean, Judge has been good all year, so I'd probably still get behind that. Stanton is one of those, when he's hot, he's hot. When he's cold, he's cold. He hit 2 bombs yesterday, So maybe that's going to right the ship a little bit. Historically, we do like his power against lefties, and I know he's got a couple tags off of Hap in the past as well. And Hap definitely gives up more power to righties than lefties. I don't think he's given up a bomb to a lefty yet. So maybe I target these big swinger righties. LeMahieu, the pushback on LeMahieu is like he's not a high barrel, necessarily high power guy when he's not at Yankee Stadium. So I might be just looking for the big boppers, the Judd Stanton, and Gary probably makes the lineup since Higgy caught Garrett yesterday. Another thing to watch is Yankees like to rest the players after a big game, and Stanton's been one of those candidates too. But I would be like sorely disappointed if they sit him down after yesterday. So probably the big boppers here, and these more hit for average guys could have more average fantasy point games because the Yankees don't really steal bases or nothing like that. And then fill in those guys with some more average plays from other games with stolen base potential or something like that, where they can beat out these LeMahieu's and Urshela's and guys like that.
Is Aaron Judge number one on the bomb detector today, by the way?
Yes, he is actually.
Yeah, I figured he's my number one probability guy, so I figured it might be close. But he and Gary Sanchez, I feel like very high home run probabilities for the spot, and Judge to me, I feel like he should be. The price tag is certainly a difference on DraftKings, but in terms of the potential, I would be okay flipping the ownership of Judge and Stanton, and really making Stanton the more high owned guy out of those two. Where Stanton's right now projected for 35%, Judge for 27%, or it's just shy of 28%. So I would take a little more Judge there. Michael King on the other side, we got going against Minnesota, 5.2 implied runs going against him. King on the year, keeping the ball down fairly well, 28.4% fly ball rate, 9-degree launch angle. So those are things that are indicating he's getting a good ground ball mark, but a 1.3 whip. He's walking guys at an 8.3% clip, so not the greatest mark. And King himself, not a good strikeout guy either, 21% strikeout rate on the year. Did have, I think, a decent pitch count last time out, but on the year still 49 pitches per appearance, 3 innings per appearance overall. Is a lot of time being the long reliever. Alex, you willing to go to Michael King at all today? 1% ownership and a very, very low price tag, but certainly not a guy who's been fantastic at getting strikeouts historically.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, he's kind of filling in for Corey Kluber while Kluber is dealing with some injury, if I recall correctly. It's not like Michael King is a high prospect, and they're not letting him go deep in games, which is the main problem. He's going about mid-60s in pitches each game. And it doesn't seem to correlate much with how he's performing. So he's a guy I'm crossing off. I mean, when you factor in the weather in this game, it's kind of a no-brainer to fade Michael King.
Gundacker, how are you feeling about King? And I guess transition me over to the Minnesota hitters here, where you're going to have a lot of ownership going to these guys. And it is still a good Yankee bullpen. And King, I think a guy who's been good enough at keeping the ball down that I would say I don't think King is a great pitching play today. But I also think Minnesota, to me, just looks very over-owned. The top stack tool does back that out. 11% chance of being a top stack, 21% ownership expected.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. King doesn't seem like he has slate breaking potential based on his pitch count and just his DNA. But if he can eat 5 innings for him, give up less than maybe an Ernie per inning and a bomb. One of the good things about yesterday for the Yankees is Garrett Cole went deep enough to, and the game became a laugher, that they only used 2 bullpen arms, Luis Sessa and Brooks Kriske. So today they could have some really upper echelon options. Aroldis Chapman, Chad Green, even Lucas Litke has been pretty solid for him, and Jonathan Loáisiga. So it's not like Aaron Boone would be slow to flip the switch if all heck broke loose. So I do think the Yankees bullpen could cut this game in half and play spoiler, and that might dampen my expectations for the Twins. On the bat side for the Twins, Jorge Polanco hit a pair of bombs yesterday. The late one was off really, really mop up duty guy. But other than that, like, this Twins lineup has been somewhat as disappointing as the Yankees offense on this season. So I could understand, both offenses letting us down, but I could make a stronger case for the Twins offense letting us down because of the Yankees bullpen.
It's also worth pointing out in this game too, we have a few of the highest probability home run hitters on the slate, where we have Aaron Judge plus 240, Miguel Sano plus 230 on the Twins side, and then Stanton is the number one guy overall plus 225. So the prop betting markets are A, not only hip to the game, but B, very much leaning towards this being a game with some power. So Sano, though, standing out in his own tier, I think kind of interesting. He'll be 3,500 on DK, also be 27% owned. So that is a lot of ownership going there. And now, Alex, I'll ask you the same question about the Twins to close the loop here before we get to our last two games. But Twins bats, are you feeling anything strong here for these guys? Because it is reasonable price tags for them. I get why they're owned, but I think it feels more like mini stack situations based on the ownership.
Yeah, the ownership is pretty scary here. I mean, they look good, especially when you factor in the salaries, because it is 90 degrees and they're facing Michael King. So those are two factors definitely working in their favor. Not a bad team as well. So I do feel like they make a lot of sense, but they are really high owned compared to their chance of being the top stack. So just a lot of replacement level players are kind of rolling out there right now, and that's kind of driving down the salaries of everyone and the ownership up. So I'm kind of torn. I feel like it's going to be hard to stack the Kings and have a lineup that has like a pretty unique way to win. So it's not one of my top choices.
Yeah, and Sano, I think, just gets the most deserving shout out here. He's completely a boom bust play, and one it's very highly owned for a boom bust play, but a 7.3% on run rate against right hand pitching since 2019 and 3,500. That can certainly be one that pays off for itself. Last two games here, Toronto 4.4 implied runs going against Dallas Keuchel. Dallas Keuchel, a guy historically we don't love in fantasy, not a great strikeout guy, a 12% K rate, and he's also gotten a little bit less good in terms of hit and run prevention on the year, a 1.3 WHIP, which increased slightly from a 1.7 WHIP. Historically, 4.3 xFIP, also a little bit worse, but still he's keeping that ball down adequately. 20% fly ball rate, 2.5 degree launch angle, getting barreled, but doesn't matter, I guess, if you're driving the ball into the ground. Keuchel would be not a play for me today, Alex, but do you have any thoughts on him? And I guess Toronto going against him, given the fact that one thing Keuchel does fairly well is limit the opposing team's production.
Yeah, that definitely kind of it takes away a pitcher from the player pool because he doesn't strike guys out, and not the most exciting matchup for the other team either. So I definitely don't think Keuchel's a good play. I think Toronto is like a talented enough team to overcome kind of a matchup that's not great for fantasy. And we see that with their 5 projected runs today, one of the higher ones of the slate. And it doesn't look like everyone's on them, maybe because they're worried about some ground balls from Keuchel. So I think Toronto is worth targeting.
Gundacker, are you feeling a little more Toronto bats for yourself as well? As Alex mentioned, it's not a ton of ownership, and a good amount of that's going to be going to Bo Bichette. It looks like on DraftKings, 17% expected ownership his way. But Toronto bats for you, Gundacker. I guess if you have any strong feelings about Keuchel, I know it's historically not the kind of guy I think you would like, but if you want to give him a cosign here, I'm sure you could use the ego boost.
No, Keuchel. I really don't like to get to contact pitchers in fantasy if I can help it. Every now and then, you get back against the wall on a small slate. I don't think this slate is that small to put him up against a pretty menacing Blue Jays lineup. So I'm out on him. And yeah, I definitely can cherry pick Blue Jays bats, and I'll probably have Blue Jays stacks. And I think both offenses will be probably near 20%ers for me, based on the ownership projections I'm looking at now. Like, I think this game could shoot out.
On the other side, we're going to have Hyunjin Ryu going, another guy who's been pretty decent on the year, 3.1% on run rates, increase from the 2.5% he's had since 2019, but still pretty good mark right there with league average, 3.6 xFIP as well. Also a little bit worse than his historical numbers, but not that far off. Whip, same thing. Batting average, same thing. But Hyunjin Ryu does get strikeouts, I guess a league average guy, just really across the board, 22.8% strikeout rate, which is close to the longer term strikeout rate, not this one. This year at 24%. But Ryu keeps the ball down fairly well, low barreled ball rate, or decently low 8% barreled ball rate. Alex, do you have any interest in Ryu as a pitcher himself? Or I guess, would you be more interested in the Chicago bats with not a lot of ownership going their way, but also not the highest potential to be a top stack?
Yeah, I think Ryu is somewhat intriguing because he is the 3rd highest projected pitcher on our ownership, and the price it's very bad compared to Scherzer and Rogers. But if you're playing Ryu, it's kind of like betting against those guys, and they have about 4 times the ownership of Ryu. So it going contrarian a pitcher isn't usually my favorite strategy because you're kind of hurting yourself because you can't get like the better bats when you pay up a pitcher and be contrarian. So I don't love that strategy, but that is one way to build a unique lineup is to pivot to Ryu from Rogers or Scherzer.
And Gundacker, you hinted at liking the White Sox bats, but are you willing to get any Ryu for yourself, given, as Alex points out, it is a really ugly price tag for him, but he's pitching deep enough into games, 90.5 pitches per appearance, about 6 innings per appearance as well, that if you're going to own some White Sox, it doesn't seem like it'd be crazy to have some Ryu just in case they do fail.
Yeah, this is where the MME scummy approach takes front stage here. White Sox, a top 3 team in WRC plus, and they've been lefty mashers since last season. But we've seen a couple of lefties bleed through in the last month or so. Jordan Montgomery and Robbie Ray had massive strikeout games. So it's not impossible for that to be a range of outcome here. So yeah, I'm going to have some Ryu. I might have more Ryu than White Sox stacks percentage, but I'm going to have both sides of this coin flip here and hope for the best.
Yeah, and that's something we talked about on yesterday's show too, the volatility spots where you think there's a chance, hey, the pitcher could go off, the hitters could also go off. There's no issue playing both sides of it. And unfortunately, I think it sometimes gets misconstrued because in other sports, it's usually a little more binary, but in baseball, it's a world of infinite outcomes. And I think that's a reasonable approach today. If you're playing some Ryu, play some White Sox and vice versa too. Last game on the slate, Kansas City, 3.6 implied runs against the aforementioned chalk play that is Frankie Montas. And Frankie Montas on the year just continues to be owned a lot. And I guess the price tags come down a little bit. Not a terrible projection for him. He does have a 22.9% K rate on the year. It's a little bit under league average for the year. The 1.4 whip, more problematic, but a 272 batting average, 4% home run rate. Montas to be chalky. I'm kind of surprised by a Gundacker to see it going against Kansas City. And in fact, they do strike out at a 22.5% clip on the year against right-hand pitching. It's not a great number. So I'm generally not a Montas believer though. So are you more of a believer in Frankie Montas with a lot of the field definitely taking a leap with him today?
It seems like his ERA is higher than where it should be if it stabilizes based on his advanced metrics, the 12% swinging strike rate. At 8K, yeah, I think he's the best of the worst when it comes to guys to get a little bit different, right? If we're trying to find some pivots to Rogers and Scherzer, I think Montas at 8K, we could live with 18 fantasy points. And the Royals, they can strike out. They got an 86 WRC plus against righties. So there's a world where in this stadium, Oakland Coliseum, Montas thrives, and maybe gives us a quality start. So I maybe the ownership is not what I expected, but I understand it. Like, I think he is a guy that I would lean on for the best shot at 20 DKP without giving me negatives based on the matchup, based on the park. So I'll be a buyer in him, but it's not a comfort click.
Alex, how about you with Montas? It does seem like he has a decent projection on him from the data that we have today. 16 fantasy points or 16.1 fantasy points. It's a projection right now. And he is a guy, throwing 92 pitches per appearance, not a bad mark. And certainly I think the strike rate, swing strike rate numbers and chase rate numbers maybe do indicate there could be better things to come. So how are you feeling about him relative to the field, Alex?
Yeah, I think Montas is a guy that's really going to click today because he is at that mid-price range. That'll help you get Rogers or Scherzer plus some good bats. So the thing is, I don't love Montas. He only has a 23% K rate so far this year, and Kansas City isn't a great K matchup. But Kansas City isn't a good squad, and the temperature of 56 degrees definitely will slant towards limiting run production. So I feel like Montas is a good play, but the ownership, I'm just kind of thinking that if you go SP2 Montas, maybe you're over optimizing a little bit too much. And maybe getting a lineup that doesn't click so much will help you clear a path to winning tonight.
And I guess the bats here, given Montas's ownership, I wouldn't mind taking some stabs at the Royals bats, though they do seem to have a pretty low probability to be a top stack with a 5% top stack rate on the slate. And I guess one other point for Montas worth bringing up too, he does have a strikeout prop around 5.5, and then some books 6.5. So I guess it does seem like getting a little bit of respect here from the bookmakers for the strikeout props on the day. But the Royals, I don't know, I feel like they're not that owned, and I don't mind being on a team that's not that owned going against Montas, who gets hit pretty hard. 11% barrel ball rate, 15-degree launch angle's not the worst either. So I'm willing to get there for the bats, Gundacker. But are you willing to take any Royals bats, given that there are a few really weak ones here? The bottom of the order in particular, I think, is pretty downright ugly.
Yeah, I think the best Royals game so far this season has come against below average pitching in higher temperatures out there in Kaufman, which has kind of boosted the ball. Like Alex said, temps in the mid 50s here. It's the quote unquote coldest game on the slate in this park. It doesn't really do any favors. So if I was going to get to the bats, maybe I don't tilt the seesaw to the power as much as I do for the hit for average stolen base guys like a Whit Merrifield. Santana has a higher base running grade this season than a lot of people might think. So maybe I look at those guys, so put some more respect on the hit for average and guys that might be aggressive and make something happen. But it's definitely very plausible to take that approach, but I'm not going to be over invested in it.
Alex, do you have any interest at all in the Royals bats here? And again, not a lot of ownership going their way, but also not the highest potential to be a top stack.
Yeah, I think that Kansas City is a pretty good stack to target tonight, actually. The weather definitely doesn't help. But the thing I'm seeing is their best bats are very low owned, like the top 4 in the order, including Merrifield and Salvador Perez and Santana possibly. They're priced up a little bit more, so I don't think everyone building with lineup optimizers is going to naturally land on these guys. But 1% for the top guys in the team and the matchup versus Montas not being scary, I think there's some real potential here.
Yeah, not a lot of ownership going to anybody here. A little bit more going to Soler and Hunter Dozier because of their cheap price tags. But this team has a 10% chance to be a top value stack on the day. And the fact they're not owned, I'm a little surprised by, given the fact people just are trying to save on the slate, it seems, based on some of the other ownership we talked about. But I think they're a pretty viable pivot to the Twins would be the one that I'm seeing the most, because people land on that with the low price tags a lot. But obviously, you don't have to go crazy on it because only 3.6% of the field is going to be on there. Mike Minor, the last pitcher to hit on here, lefty's been at a 26% K rate on the year going against Oakland, who has a 24% K rate. But Minor does give up a good amount of hard contact, a 10% barrel ball rate, 16-degree launch angle that could be problematic even in not great hitting conditions for Oakland. So Alex, in the spot, do you prefer the Oakland bats? Do you like Minor, or are you mostly indifferent to both sides?
I think both are pretty good. Minor, it's kind of the same situation as Montas, where the ownership outpaces the spot a good amount. Minor's a little bit better at strikeouts than Montas, but the matchup versus Oakland, they have a team that hits better and strikes out a little worse than average. They strike out less than average. So I think Minor is just an average play. But no one's on the Oakland bats, so I think they got some good power hitters. The prices are high, which is driving people away. This is a team that you might want to take some chances on.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm at with it too. Oakland bats do have a 3% aggregate ownership expected with a 6.4 chance of being a top stack. So Gundacker, close us out with your thoughts on this. Oakland bats, Mike Minor, are you feeling any particularly strong feelings for either side?
No, not strong from either side, but I could get behind. I'm probably more on the Oakland bats if we're looking at price, all things considered. Chatty Pendergrass, Mark Canha, maybe Chapman to an extent, Stephen Piscotty, some of those cats, but it's not something I want to be overly aggressive on ownership wise, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
All right, and let's close it out with our home run picks real fast. And Gundacker, I'll give you the first crack, and I'm hoping you just don't take the number one guy in the bottom sector. Is really all I'm asking here.
How about Mark Canha? We'll keep it there.
Okay, I respect that. Ruined some DFS players' nights yesterday from what I saw on Twitter, so that was a lot of fun. Alex, I'll let you have a home run pick. I'm going to take Aaron Judge because just in case, Alex, I know sometimes there's a troll sense of strong in you. So Aaron Judge is my pick, even though it's really not a heroic one. Alex, how about you?
I would never pick Aaron Judge. That's too obvious. No,
how dare you
mentioned that Miguel Sano is kind of a good boom bust play. Super high owned, so I don't know if he's the best DFS play, but he's hitting for 255 ISO. It's 90 degrees, so I'll go with Sano.
All right, so there you go. And when our producer Tyler throwing in Vladdy Jr., it looks like as his pick. So going to the Guerrero family for his home run. So there's all the picks you can bet on all of us today. Make sure to go follow at Gundacker, follow at Awesemo Dfs, and follow at Chris Spags. If you're watching this video live or after the fact, hit that like button if you can, and make sure to subscribe to the channel to check out all the content we have going on all day long. And that includes shows like the Tip Off, the NBA Deeper Dive, and NBA Live Before Lock coming up on the channel in about a half hour. So check those out and make sure to check out the ownership projections and all the data on the site as it's updated as well, and get part of that as well at awesemo.com/join. 15% off with the promo code MLB Deeper Dive at awesemo.com/join. So check that out. Appreciate all you guys for watching. Enjoy the rest of your days. Good luck.